Welcome to our study, everyone. Today we're going to finish slightly earlier, just because it's the Kini Day, and there's a talk that's going to be beginning at 7, and I just need a few minutes to set up. So we'll probably finish at 10 to 7 or something like that, quarter to. So, but the program otherwise is as usual. Okay. So presently, we are studying the Buddhist psychology of awakening. And as you know, we're not studying this to become, learned in the sense of just knowing a lot of categories. It's really, as practitioners, it's very helpful for us to understand that this mind that drives the impulses very often is fueled by confusion, admittedly, right? Ego. The insecurity of trying to handle everything on the basis of thinking of me. And we very often feel that these impulses, they just drive us. You know, we have no choice in the matter. And the more we understand actually that everything that we perceive in our reality is actually made up of conditions, and we can influence these conditions. And the fact that everything is conditioning means that there is actually no ultimate reality to it. It's just flim-flam, paper tigers, the famous rope and snake. We're falling for a hoax, and that's where, for us to see through this magic display that we take as real, it's very helpful to understand the compounded, the composite, the constructed nature of what appears to be so solid and real. And that's why it's really helpful for us to look at our reality. And this is what we're doing with Abhidharma. We are looking at how our reality is driven by a subjective condition of our mind, and understanding then the nature of this enables us to then have a greater control, really, to master, not be victims, not to be subject, or gullibly just tag along with these storylines and these impulses that in fact are composite of so many different conditions. So that's why we're studying Abhidharma overall. Now, last time we were looking at a few basic conditions that are really helpful for us in order to work with our mind and work with the overall project, which is of course the project of truth. Now, for modern people, that's like truth. Is there still such a thing? And there is very much such a thing as truth, because we live with realities. It's a truth that we have to pay taxes, and if we don't pay taxes, there are consequences. We have to drive in the right side of the road, as in Australia, the left side of the road, in Europe, the right side, and so forth. So we have a reality that functions. Some people will call us dad. Some people will call us sweetheart. Some people will call you Mr. So-and-so. And there's no conflict between all of these. They're all true. So we could say, oh yeah, but then there's no absolute truth. If I'm not entirely dad, I'm not entirely sweetheart, I'm not entirely so-and-so. Yeah, but that still nevertheless applies. We still have a relative truth that functions. So there's very much a very real project of what we call truth. And it's for us to simply understand the nature of phenomena, which is what will set us free. This is the purpose of Dharma. It's to understand the nature of phenomena. And so Steven, he's taking us through some of the prerequisites actually of studying, which is simply also just, being able to, oh, here we go. Oh gosh. You remember I've had some issues with okay. This is a book here because I bought it in the Australian department of Kindle. And everything else I have is in the American. Yeah, all right. Okay, hey, this is a wonderful opportunity to practice patience. See, now I could decide that the universe is ganged up on me and the universe is evil. I could also understand that this is simply a glitch due to, all the various things that go into this. So, so I'm decided to understand this is a, how do you say, a composite situation. Let's just see here. Kindle Cloud Reader. Okay, let's see. It worked last time. Famous last words. Yes, do keep me signed in, please. Huh. Maybe we should do something else. Maybe the class should take the day off, and we should just have a picnic instead. What do you think? It's not really. Well, I could try to. Yeah, somebody's got an idea. What would you like to do? No, today off. Okay, we have the book. Well, good on you. Okay, so there's clearly some very motivated students in the class, well equipped and so forth, in which case I shall most certainly do my utmost. But you see, the thing is, Buddhist psychology of awakening, it doesn't figure in my ordinary Kindle. Okay, I'm gonna try. Thank you for your patience, by the way. I know you're all Buddhist meditators, so you're not discombobbled by adverse circumstances, so that's good. On the contrary, you abide by Paul Rinpoche's famous adage, I don't like happiness, I like suffering. When I have happiness, the kleshas increase. When I suffer, my mind turns to the Dharma. Suffering is the blessing of the deity or something like that. Okay. Voilà, regarde. Oh là là. Thank you, guys. I think this must be due to some of the powerful yogis in the class. No, it's not responding, but I think that we might get over that. See what else there is. The picnic, I wish. It's gorgeous in Melbourne, but it's in lockdown. Plus, I'm stuck at work. All right. I hope you won't get into trouble for following a class on Abhidharma. Maybe have another participant who has the book share his screen. That's actually a good idea. Look, I think we probably will. I'm still clinging to the hope that we might be able to do this. Let's see. Ach, du Lieber. All right. Okay, clearly he's not responding. Okay. We could take screenshots of the pages you need. Yeah. Thank you. Look, I'm very grateful for the propositions here. And I might take advantage of them, But for the time being, I'm still a little bit clinging to the hope that I could get this thing to work. But so what would that involve? If some of you take screenshots, well, okay, you can try. Let's just give this a go, and if that's not working, then what? You'd send screenshots from, we're looking at the reference, right? The reference, we're going to look at Bhutan's classification. I think, was it Bhutan? No, it's maybe Bhutan, but it's the Tibetans, like Steven was saying, the Tibetans, particularly when it comes to the definition of Dharma, the term Dharma, they adopt a tenfold classification of what Dharma can mean, and that's what we're going to look at today. So, so that's, if you want to email me some screenshots of that, then yes, that'd be great. That could be plan B. Okay. You see, I don't have the hard copy. Okay, it's hanging again. Okay, well, let's just see here. No, it's not happening. No, I am entering the the password correctly. Try rebooting now. This is I've tried. This is just such a it's an issue with Kindle, and unfortunately, Kindle is the only source that I have. Let me just try actually, because you guys have the book, right? Let me just try to bring it up on my Kindle on my iPad. Now, the only thing is I won't be able to screen share with you, but we might just have to do that, right? How many do not have the book? Is it a lot? I have the impression a lot of you have the book, right? I mean, presumably all of you have a Kindle that works, right? So so look, I have it now. Actually, I do have it. I don't yet. Look, I'm gonna be reading from it, so hopefully that works. Yeah, we'll just go slowly. And someone is saying, happy to just listen. Okay. All right. So meanwhile, I'll get on to, yeah, that's fine with me. Good. All right. Well, I'm gonna get on to, I have been on to what's it called? No worries. All right. Don't worry, be happy. Okay, good. All right. Well, I'll get on to Kindle before next week and hopefully have something resolved. Meanwhile, here we are. And yeah, actually, look, we'll study here by this lake in Alberta. And put the title of the book here on the side. And yeah, okay. So look, the okay. So Dharma as reference. Okay. 10 reference by Vasubandhu. So when we talk about Dharma, In general, we have various forms of understanding, various ways of understanding the term Dharma. So many of you know Dharma just means phenomena in general. It also means the Buddhist teaching. And there are, of course, different ways that we can understand this. Yeah, you're all good to listen in from Alberta. That's good. All right. So Dharma is reference. Okay. So okay, just to get the classifications right. So we are presently looking at Bhutan, who was a great scholar. He wrote a very great history of the Dharma, and he was an important teacher in the Kalachakra tradition. He lived in the 13th to 14th century, and it's actually from this history that he divides the way of understanding the term Dharma into 4 different sections. So we're going to look at the first, which is then different reference for the term Dharma. Okay. So it reads here, Dharma's reference, 10 reference by Vasubandhu. Bhutan's first section is called different reference for the word Dharma. Here, Bhutan quotes Vasubandhu. In addition to the Abhidharma Kosha, Vasubandhu also wrote a text called The Proper Mode of Exposition, in which he laid out a number of distinctions about the Dharma. The Tibetans in particular fastened onto one section of this work, wherein he lists 10 different senses in which the word Dharma is used. And that's true. Whenever you would ask a Khenpo, about the word Dharma, then they will always say that, oh yeah, we have 10 definitions. And that's right. But it's a bit, there is actually a larger context really within Vasubandhu's, the various ways in which Bhutan classifies it and drawing on Vasubandhu. But anyway, for each referent, Vasubandhu gives the definition and then quotes how the word Dharma is used in the Buddhist context. It's very concrete. Just to hear this makes us appreciate the nuances of the multiple ways in which the word Dharma is used. According to Vasubandhu, Dharma can mean a number of things. So now we're going to look at these 10. Yeah? So, 1. What can be known or cognized? Dharma is the plurality of factors of reality, as in the expression, dharmas are conditioned or unconditioned. So that's where dharmas mean phenomena. It just means everything there is. And we can classify everything there is into conditioned and unconditioned. For example, this table is conditioned. You could say time or space. Things like that, they are in some sense unconditioned. They're not really put together, but then again, the way that we classify space is really just the absence of something that obstructs space. So for us to speak about space, it's really on the basis of what we would identify as non-space. So we would still refer, while we say it's unconditioned, we would also still refer to it as a dependent arising. Just to make it complicated. But anyway, when we say dharmas, then we do mean that we're referring basically to everything. So that's dharma, and that's definitely not with a capital D, nothing Buddhist about it. It's just stuff. It's just a phenomena. Then that's this first one. Then the path to liberation itself. This meaning is represented in the expression, Dharma is completely pure view. So that's where we refer to Che as meaning understanding things correctly. Then there's Nirvana. We observe this meaning in the expression, I take refuge in the Dharma. So when we take refuge in the Dharma, yes, it's the truth of phenomena. It's also the path of liberation, but it's also then the potential for liberation as in Nirvana. So then Steven says, interestingly, Vasubandhu says, in its true sense, this expression means full and complete enlightenment, nirvana. So sometimes we talk about small nirvana, just in the sense of retreating into a personal peace, like nirodha. That's why we very often would say, like for example, we would say, in the Buddha sadhana that we do at the end here when we practice, we say, he who grants the liberation from samsara and nirvana. And you might think, well, what do I really want to be liberated from nirvana? It sounds awfully nice. And that's where nirvana, in that sense, is actually just understood as a condition of peace, in which we very much operate still with the sense of the confused self. And from that point of view, we're just happy to abide in peace. It's nirodha, it's gokpa, it's just, having a break. But it's still very much the basic, you could say, cognitive obscuration of believing in a self of mind, and also self of phenomena is actually still there. And that's why this is associated with the Hinayana. Now here, because Vasubandhu is teaching this in a Mahayana context, he might. Okay, don't hold me to that one, but anyway, in general, when we say nirvana, then here, when we talk about full and complete enlightenment, which is what Stephen is saying, that's beyond samsara, and meaning the suffering of self, and also that place in which the self retreats into peace, which is also still bound by confusion. And that's where we'd want to be free from that nirvana. So what we're taught, and this can be confusing, what we mean here, however, is complete enlightenment, complete awakening, in which neither the categories of suffering or the categories of free from suffering apply. It's simply awakening altogether. Otherwise, we're just thinking, oh, I'm having a nice dream. Or we are in a dream and we're just happy to be not having a nightmare. And that's where the Buddha wants more than us just having a little, nice dream. He wants us to wake up entirely, because we're generally suffering. And so complete enlightenment is then greater nirvana. So that's also what Dharma can mean. Okay? Chö, or Dharma as in mental object. There are certain things which are Dharma bases. This is a technical term that refers to whatever is exclusively an object for the mind itself, and does not depend on sense fields. That is, it is not an object for visual, auditory, olfactory, gustatory, or tactile perception. All right, that's all true. And that also means, we have the five senses, like Stephen was just saying, right? Like in the Heart Sutra, we talk about eye, ear, nose, etc., right? And the objects of these are then what we call the five sense perceptions. But there's one more faculty and one more object of faculty, and that's the mind. Okay? And this we can call the sixth sense. Nothing mystical here. But just simply in a Buddhist context, the sixth sense is what we call mind, yi, chitta. And the object of the chitta, which is, I have a mind, right? And so, somebody says, don't think about a pipe, Si ne pèse une pipe is, or somebody says, don't think about, the sun. And of course, then we think about the sun, right? So that's where we have an object of the mind. And that object is what we also refer to as Dharma. So we have, on one hand, we have chitta, mind, and then we have its object, which is Dharma. Okay? Merit. Okay, and this is number 5, merit. This is exemplified in the expression, they behaved in accord with the Dharma. So that's virtue or merit. Let's just see what the Tibetan is. Punya or Sona. Okay. This life. Okay, so Dharma can mean this life. This meaning is conveyed in the senses worldly beings are attached to this present life, to worldly Dharma. Dharma, in the sense of worldly Dharma, means precisely from the Buddhist viewpoint to only have regard for this life as it is, with no thought for lives to come, no thought for the karmic implications, and so on. Yeah, Jithinki Chu. So that kind of, it just really means, the phenomena of this life. And that can of course cover all sorts of secular aspects of ethics, morality, and so forth. So it could very well go into what we sometimes refer to as religious categories, but it's still within a worldly, confused sense. Teachings of the Buddha. This is expressed in the quote, the Dharma consists of Sutra, Vinaya, Abhidharma, and so on. There are 12 divisions of that. So we have the Tripitaka, which is what constitutes the Buddha's teaching. Somebody says, what is the Buddha's teaching? You're justified in saying, well, the Buddha taught what is classified as the Tripitaka. And yes, then we have the 12 branches of the teaching. We'll probably touch on that. What is subject to change or aging? This is observed in the sentence, the body is endowed with the Dharma of aging. So that means the phenomena that have to do with change or aging. Religious vow. This is Dharma in the sense of an intention to lead one's life in accordance with ethical norms, in the sense of the 4 dharmas of a monk or a nun. This is a little bit similar to the previous one, which is the phenomena of, let's say, aging. Here's the phenomena of monastic ordination, but that's also referred to as Dharma. And then worldly custom. This is Dharma in the sense of cultural conditioning, as in the expression, the Dharma of that country, the Dharma of those people. So we would, we have this that's just the ways of the world, so to speak, the Dharma of the Dharma of the Danes, right? The Dharma of the French. The Danes, green Tuborg beer, and the French, I don't know, too many things, etc. So there you have it. So in this book, Steven says, we will focus primarily on Dharma as what we can know, definition 1, as well as the Dharma as teachings of the Buddha, definition 7. To distinguish these two, we'll capitalize the word dharma when it refers to the Buddha's teaching. So this is where then we have the capital. So that's okay. Back to Bhutan. Then there's the second. What can we call it? What is it again? He calls it the 4 sections, 4 categories of Dharma according to Bhutan. So the second category is etymology of Dharma. How is the Sanskrit word Dharma formed? There's a general sense and a special sense. The general sense comes from the root dir, which means to uphold, to maintain, to support, or to sustain. And the Tibetan also, che also implies to hold or shape something. So that's a dir. Okay, let's just see the footnote. Yeah, dir. Okay, the special sense. So that's the general sense of the root. The special sense is Sat Dharma, the highest, supreme, or sublime Dharma. That is, Dharma as the highest teaching. Dharma is applied to Buddhism. Because Sat Dharma, the sublime Dharma, the Buddha Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha and his heirs is so important, there is a list of 3 different senses of Sat Dharma. So we have Dharma, but then we have the Dharma of truth, and this is then what we refer to as the Buddha's teaching. So 3 different senses of Sat Dharma. The Dharma of the Buddha, the one whose teaching is supreme, the Dharma that is supreme. Dharma applies to Buddhism. In this sense, Sat or supreme and Dharma as appositional, the same. So that's the highest Dharma. And then the Dharma for the supreme ones, those who are blessed and temporarily flexible enough in their hearts and minds to take the teaching seriously into their lives. This is the most important sense of Sat Dharma for us here. So that's where we see Dharma as a personal application. So, us as practitioners. So then there's the 3rd category, according to Bhutan, Dharma as a Buddhist teaching. In the Abhidharma Kosha, Vasubandhu says that Sat Dharma as a Buddhist teaching is twofold. Dharma as a means of conveying, called Dharma of scriptures. Dharma as understanding itself, called Dharma of realization. So this is important. This is what when we, for example, talk about that we have Buddhism in this world, it really is constituted on the basis of a heritage of literature, the Buddha's teaching, all the commentaries, all the pith instructions, and so on. This is then what we call the Buddha, the Dharma of the scriptures, or the Dharma of transmission. And then there's the living tradition, that we have extraordinary great beings that have realization. That's what really renders the teaching more than just theory. So this is where we speak about then the Dharma of realization. So let's see, the first one is, I think, Abhidharma, Agama Dharma, Lungiche, and the second one is Adhigama Dharma or Abhidharma, Tokiche. Okay. For the Tibetan, it's Lungiche and Tokpeche. Yeah. So Steven says there's the means of conveying through text, and text here means whatever medium is used to convey the teaching, the Dharma as means. And there is also Dharma as end result, as realization, as full and complete understanding. It is that which this means is aiming at. So we could talk about the skillful means of the Dharma, the teaching, the structure, and like yesterday, Tonsagen's Rinpoche in his talk, he was talking about this also, where he was saying the means is necessarily cultural. You know, here we are speaking English, we're using the term psychology, etc. We're presenting the Buddha Dharma in a way that's particular to our culture. It would be presented differently in Japan and Tibet, etc. So that's where also the scriptures, they are spoken in a particular language that's particular to that culture, and also the methods. So like Rinpoche was saying, the upaya aspect of the skillful means of the Dharma is necessarily cultural, and that's also what Steven is implying here when he talks about the Dharma scriptures. But then there's the object, realization, the realization of the Dharmakaya. That has nothing to do with anything cultural. That's a really important point, because so often in the cultural context of, or as you could say, the cultural misunderstanding where things get lost in translation, people might think that Buddhism is what people do in different Buddhist cultures. And that's not at all true. The cultural aspect is only the means for a realization that is universal. That is the falling away of obscuration, awakening the inner disposition of Buddha nature. So that's the objective. So there's the means and the objective. And this also corresponds to the Dharma scriptures and the Dharma realization. So really important to have that point, that the objective of the teaching is entirely universal. This is not something that the Buddha invented. When the Buddha taught, he was just showing us something. When the Buddha speaks about, like Rinpoche was also saying yesterday, when the Buddha speaks about impermanence, it's not as if the Buddha invented impermanence. The Buddha has just awoke to the nature of reality, to the nature of phenomena. And so the Buddha is just a teacher who enables us to discover reality. And so the objective of the Buddhist teaching is not Buddhist, just like impermanence is not Buddhist. You know, it's not like the Buddha say, "Let there be impermanence." You know, then we'd have somebody we could complain to. But no, this is the nature of reality. By the way, if you didn't see Rinpoche's talk yesterday, you must. It was utterly brilliant. So please. Okay. What's special and precious about the Buddha Dharma is that it is wholesome, good, and in accord with reality. There you go. It is said, a superior practitioner, upon merely hearing the name of a Buddhist text, can completely realize the essence of that teaching. The less capable have to descend to studying the content. Okay, well, here we are. That's why titles are given such wonderful names, because there's a tendril here, an auspiciousness in the name. Tendril meaning there's auspicious conditions that, if we're open to it, opens up for, you could say, the whole scope of what's implied. Buddha Dharma is considered to have the special quality or flavor of being good in the very beginning, in the middle, and even at the end. This is the case because it is said to accord with reality. That's one sense of what's unique about such teachings. Okay, we're driving up a one-way street and somebody tells us you're going up a one-way street, so we turn around. Already at the beginning, we're beginning to align ourselves with reality. From the very start that we practice non-aggression, calming the mind, what's there not to like about it? As we progress along the path, we'll gain strength, wisdom, and compassion naturally. And ultimately, taking this to the nth degree, falling away of any confusion whatsoever. So, and releasing all the natural goodness that's innate. So we say the teaching is good in the beginning, middle, and end. To return to the term unique or one taste, what is this taste? It is said to be unique, wonderful, and good. It is said to have the taste of liberation, vimoksha itself. So liberation, vimoksha. Yeah? Is there anything to be said about that? No. So every word of the Dharma, if it is truly Dharma, and every combination of the word has the true invariant taste of leading to liberation. Like Rinpoche says in the beginning of the Heart Treasure of the Enlightenment, even just hearing your name, just one drop of hearing your name brings liberation. Needless to say, the above perspectives represent what anthropologists called an emic perspective, that is, an insider perspective that accords with those attitudes held by practitioners within the Buddhist tradition. There are, of course, outsider perspectives, ethic approaches, which are, for the most part, the approach of so-called academic historical accounts of Buddhism. Okay, now what we would want is actually to fuse those two, because the moment that we're saying that Buddhism is true, it will be interpreted as being an emic statement. However, if we were to say science is true because it's verifiable, it's empirical, etc., that would not be seen as being an emic statement necessarily. It would be taken to be something that is, verifiable, and that's where actually for Buddhism to have impact in the larger conversation in the world in general, it's very important that anything that we are operating with is actually understood beyond just its emic perspective, and really in a context of what can be seen as being objectively, or you could say phenomenally valid. And so that's actually where we actually could engage with a larger context. Otherwise, if we're just sticking purely within the sense of saying, oh, the Buddhism is good in the beginning, middle, and end, if we say that, no, the Buddhist will say, yes, you're so right. But anybody else who sees it will say, well, that's just your Buddhist point of view. So what actually enables us to engage with a larger community and be part of a larger conversation is actually to substantiate this kind of statement. And that's where we need to develop. So many of us Buddhists, we're so lazy, we can't be bothered to actually engage with other people and actually be part of a conversation, which you think you would be in view of seeing how much suffering there is in the world. It would be very nice if we could actually not, hammer dogma, but really actually propose some solutions to a lot of the problems there are. And that is exactly where we need to actually appreciate the universality of the Buddhist teaching. Okay. Okay, this is. Okay, how beautiful. Maybe Steven just wishes for us to listen to his text. Gorgeous. Yes, I agree with what you said about Rinpoche's teaching being brilliant. Yeah, it was really good. Okay. So, in the Shravakayana traditions, and this is again, these are terms that very much are found within, say, the Mahayana doxography, meaning the Mahayana way of classifying the sort of way of the teaching, where we then have what's called the Vibhashika and the Sautrantika traditions. These are known as the Shravakayana traditions. They say that although the Buddha is no more, one yearns to see the living presence of the Buddha. The Buddha, anticipating this concern, was said to have declared, "Whoever sees the Dharma sees me." The Buddha, as the one who shows the way, is fully present and complete in and as the Dharma. Now, this you actually have from the Salujang Bedo, this is actually translated by 84,000. This is such an important sutra. The rice seedling, yeah, that's just what it's called, the rice seedling. Anyway, the rice seedling sutra, in there, the Buddha speaks about seeing the truth, seeing the dependent arising, is understanding how everything arises in dependency, and to seeing that truth is to see the Buddha. The rice seedling. If any of you wants to read a sutra, if anybody wants to understand dependent arising, read the rice seedling. The Salujang Bedo in Tibetan. Rice seedling, yeah. Salistamba, the Salistamba Sutra, yeah. Okay, discernment. So this is then okay, we're still in the third category. Dharma as a Buddhist teaching. The variety of oh, sorry, I'm mixing up a little bit here. Okay. Sorry, I don't know why I ended up going a bit I've been reading further down. Yeah, sorry, I've been a little bit getting ahead of myself. Okay, let's just go back to where we were with regards to the Dharma of scriptures and the Dharma realization. And that's where we're talking about Dharma as a Buddhist teaching. So we looked at the 10 classifications, the etymology, and the Dharma as a Buddhist teaching, where we had the 2 transmissions, and then the 4 variety of Dharma teachings. The 4th category of Bhutan is the variety of types of Dharma in terms of teachings they are. Okay, so we have then what we call Buddhism, right, or Dharma, and then there's a variety of teachings, and these can be understood. And yeah, so the 3 turnings of the wheel of Dharma, the teachings in all their multiplicity and variety. If they are Buddha Dharma, they are of a unique taste. Okay, this is where that came from, this thing about the taste. Yeah. So the 3 turnings of the wheel of the Dharma, I think many of you are familiar with. And this is the first teaching, which is understanding how mind operates in terms of the 4 Noble Truths, and how we understand phenomena as arising in terms of the 12 links of dependent arising. The second turning of the wheel are the teachings on Shunyata, the Prajnaparamita and Madhyamika and so on. And the last turning of the wheel is sometimes referred to as the wheel of luminosity, but that is the teachings on Buddha nature. And this is also very, very important, actually, teachings in terms of understanding the Vajrayana. And then the other one was just all the various teachings there are. So Stephen says, what's special and precious about the Buddha Dharma is that it is wholesome, good, and accordant with reality. Oh, sorry, I have read this. There's something I thought I had skipped. Okay, sorry. Okay. All right, sorry about that. Anyway, there was something I had missed, but anyway, okay. So we're going through, yes, so the title indicates what, if we're superior, we get it from the title. And yes, it's all has one taste. It's good in the beginning, middle, and end. And Stephen says, every word of the Dharma, if it is truly Dharma, and every combination of the words has the true invariant taste of leading to liberation. This is the traditional view that motivates Buddhists to study the works of the Buddha and the commentaries and to put them into practice so as to achieve the goal of complete liberation from suffering. Thus, when one studies and practices, one should never disparage or become impatient with respect to the sublime Dharma. This also applies, like we might say, gosh, there's so many teachings, I want to know them all. And actually, if we just stick with what we have and apply it, particularly the practice of meditation, the practice of nonviolence, the practice of gentleness, and we cultivate this through just simply practicing, then everything else will come. We have to be patient and also simply just take the medicine without wanting to know the entire sort of pharmacology of the Buddhist teaching. Needless to say, Stephen says, the above perspectives represent what anthropologists, the emic and the etic approaches. Okay, we've done that. In the Shravakayana traditions. Yeah, so this was where whoever sees the Dharma sees me. Okay, so we have covered all the four categories of Bhutan. You probably got this. This is embarrassing with the teachers slightly lost. Okay. Is there any reference which provides a mapping between the phonetic Tibetan and the Tibetan shown in this book, the latter being quite confusing? You know, you have two different kinds of ways of representing Tibetan, right? The phonetic, and then there's the transliteration. So what I suspect is you're referring to the transliteration in the footnotes. Okay, there's two things happening with these footnotes, right? You have in general, you have SKT, which is the Sanskrit, and then you have the TIB, which is the Tibetan, and there you have transliteration. So when we're talking in the main text, Stephen will just give generally the phonetics, but in the back, in the footnotes, he will give the transliteration. The system that's used here for transliteration, okay, is something called Wiley. There was a guy called Tyrrell Wiley from the University of Seattle who devised this, and this is universally understood and practiced as really the way of representing Tibetans, because on the basis of the transliteration we can reconstruct exactly what the Tibetans say. So that's where the system is called Wiley. So yeah, that's, if you want to understand what's going on there, then yeah, look at the Google Wiley, Tyrrell Wiley, and Wiley transliteration. Okay. Okay, discernment, prajna. The Dharma that makes it possible to know Dharmas. How can these teachings be good in this way? They're good because we ourselves are fundamentally good. We are fundamentally wholesome. Therefore, we are entirely capable of accessing that free, open, and boundless ground of goodness. And we do so by learning what to accept and what to reject in accord with our natural capacity to nurture the roots of goodness, what Chögyam Trungpa Rinpoche calls our basic sanity. Now, this actually is an important point. You might say, hey, this Buddhism stuff, it's like weird. But no, everything in the Buddhist teaching, if you look carefully and you don't get confused with the cultural aspects or whatever it might be, and you understand the sense of it, always appeals to something that's deeply anchored within our being. For example, nonviolence, the respect for others, compassion, wisdom, the insight that comes from analysis, not from staying with our habitual projections or dogmatic representations. As such, the more we chew the Buddha Dharma, the better it feels. And this is because it is in alignment with this basic disposition of goodness. So that's where it's actually really good at this point that Stephen brings this up. And so that's where, as you could say, as relative as the word good might sound, when we're talking about basic goodness, we are talking about something that unconditionally exists as, you could say, a disposition within us that appreciates the condition of happiness and the condition of happiness for others, and that reacts to suffering. The fact that we are not happy to suffer actually reflects our Buddha nature. Just like a healthy body reacts to something that is toxic. Then someone says, I have a question about often used word Dharma practitioner. How would you explain who is it according to a variety of definitions of Dharma in the books? How would you explain who it is according to the variety of definitions of Dharma in the books, please? Dharma practitioner really just means those that act in accordance with the Dharma. So that's in an overall context. And as a Dharma practitioner would be more specifically those who follow the particular instructions of their Dharma teacher, or follow the instructions of their chosen path. Yeah. So basically, a Dharma practitioner would be somebody who's in alignment with the Dharma. I hope that makes sense. I like yesterday's definition of Tsongsa Gyalryen Rinpoche as practitioner is one who acts according with the truth of anicca, dukkha, anatta, and dukkha. But there is no real insight into that, only attempt. So who is then Dharma practitioner? Well, that's one way of understanding it. And Rinpoche was talking about these, it's called the Tri Lakshana, or the three characteristics, or like Rinpoche was saying, the three characters. Impermanence, knowing impermanence, and that's why he was saying you might think that Dharma practice is sitting down and meditating or doing some Buddhist practice, but just walking in a mall and observing impermanence. Yeah, whatever's there is impermanent. Dukkha, we get things and then we separate from things we like, we suffer, etc. Even wanting some things, like Rinpoche was referring to, somebody wanting to have a ring means that there's already the worry that this bond could be broken. So some insurance is needed that's already pregnant with suffering. And then anatta, in that there's no innate, you could say, reality to any given object. It's really just what we label it as, and the object itself doesn't possess any such identity. So lack of self. This is both with regards to our person and with regards to phenomena. And that's where to know this is to be a Dharma practitioner. That's one way of defining it, and that is, of course, a valid way of understanding how Dharma practitioners is. Yeah. Okay. So, what is the name for the capacity to do this? In Sanskrit, the term that is used is prajna. We've already discussed the importance of this factor of existence, this Dharma. You might be familiar with prajna from the Prajna Paramita, wisdom that has gone beyond. Literature such as the Heart Sutra, which is well known in Zen Buddhism. Okay, so prajna is this ability to see through deception. So when we cultivate prajna, it is to become wiser, it's to no longer be deceived. And so the scope of prajna is the dependent arising, to begin to understand emptiness ultimately, and also to understand the conditioned nature of phenomena. So we could say prajna is that intelligence that is not deceived. Yeah. Now, by the way, on the lines of transliteration before, and actually the way that Prajna Paramita then is represented in the footnote in the back, that's there you see it with the what we call diacritic marks. And that's how specialists, they like to represent Sanskrit words, that we'll just say Prajna Paramita, we'll just spell it ordinarily, but it can also be spelled with these, when you're a specialist and you want to really highlight that you're onto something very important and special, then you put in these diacritic marks, you know. I think as Dharma becomes more and more part of us, we won't be using diacritic marks. There's still some slightly alienated sort of relationship to the subject matter when we're using diacritics, and it's very much sort of a heritage from the old Sanskrit scholars that like to use this. But of course, it can be useful in some contexts. So still regarding prajna, in this context, prajna means wisdom. But here in these Abhidharma contexts, it means discernment. Our capacity to note distinctions that are important for our quality of life, our capacity to nurture the root of our own basic goodness. So that is the effect of having prajna. Remember, this is the definition that comes from the Abhidharma Kosha. Remember that prajna is one of the factors of experience and is defined as the capacity to precisely discern the nature of the factors of existence. So you see what's said there. Chunam la ratun nam prochepa. Yeah, that really just means, again, discernment. Yeah. To re-emphasize this crucial point here, prajna is one dharma that has as its definition the capacity to know dharmas. We might think of it as the gossamer thread connecting us to our Buddha nature. The application of discerning factors of reality is part of the path, combining both view and practice together. What then is involved in applying or bringing out this prajna? Okay, this is important. This is what we call the three prajnas. Which is hearing, reflecting, and meditating. Yeah. So one, there is prajna in terms of how to listen. There is prajna in terms of how to reflect on what was heard. There is prajna in terms of meditation, how to go deeply with what one has reflected on. So when we hear the teaching, it's a bit like understanding what is it that makes us sick, and what is it that could make us well. So when we're informed, then we need to actually, first of all, we need to critically examine the source, and we need to critically examine how we are going to process this in terms of a personal process and experience and application. So the first is hearing, the second is to personalize it, and that's where we cut through what is useful for us and what's not useful. This is where we would want to really understand how Dharma fits with us. And lastly, then, it is the application itself. Once we understand what it is that's useful and not useful, what is that's destructive, what is constructive, then the application is then to follow up with then basically doing it. Like if it is in terms of we understand what drives our health, what drives our illness, then we discontinue what drives illness, and we practice what helps us in terms of our health. And that is particularly then where we talk about meditation. It is to understand what it is that you could say damages or invokes suffering in our mind, and what it is that frees us. And that's where then we apply the practice of meditation. So that's where meditation, unfortunately, is not something you can just sit down and do. It is about knowing exactly how the mind works, and to be able to discontinue the afflicted conditions, and to cultivate what brings about what we're talking about here, prajna, insight. Okay, I think on that note we'll finish today. So thank you for your patience with the technical aspect. What was Rinpoche's teaching yesterday, and where can we find the recording? I don't know if it's come up on the Siddhartha Intent Global website. You can try to go to siddharthasintent.org. It probably is. It's very likely that it's up there. But is it up there? Okay, it might be on an SI YouTube channel. Cool. It is definitely on YouTube. You know, yesterday, if you received the invitation to a YouTube, then you saw it live, but that same link actually takes you to a recording. So please go on the SI YouTube channel. Okay, it is UD Teachings. Yeah, somebody's very kindly giving the URL, but yeah, okay. Just type in back to normal Siddhartha's intent and it comes up on YouTube. There you go, thank you. YouTube video from first day does not have a sound. Maybe they fixed it, but there is also audio available on Siddhartha Intent Global website. Okay, cool. Siddhartha's Intent Taiwan. Okay, great. Okay, so we'll conclude the class here and we'll just dedicate. By this merit may all attain omniscience, may defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness and death, from the ocean of samsara, may all beings be free. May bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it has not yet come to be, and where it has arisen, may it never fail, but grow and flourish ever more and more. Thank you. So we'll just take a few minutes break, and then we'll come back. I'll speak a little bit about the practice of meditation, and then we'll do a bit of practice. We'll finish a little bit earlier today, and that's it. Then for those who wish to join in the SOC, then that, of course, we'll have the link for that. Yeah. Okay. Just 2-minute break. So just in regard to the, we were speaking, just before we were speaking about the teaching Tongsi Khyentse Rinpoche gave in Taiwan. And the title was Return to Normal, not Back to Normal. Yeah, thanks. Okay. Just a few words on the practice of meditation. Actually, yesterday Rinpoche was repeatedly encouraging persons to, without actually labeling it meditation, even practice, to just sustain presence without getting entangled, just remaining aware. And just asking us to do this, and in a very understated way, just saying that will be helpful. If we could just have 10 seconds where we're not caught up in distraction, basically, this will be very helpful. And sometimes the Tibetans, they'll say, particularly Paltram, which is famous for having saying Gompa Mayin, Gompa Yin, which means it's not meditation in the sense of meditation, but it's meditation. That's Tibetan for you. But it depends on how you spell it. But the thing is, meditation implies, and this is also something Rinpoche was talking about, it's a little bit misleading because it does give some sense of going in deep. Now, Rinpoche was talking about jhana, and there was some translator friend of mine who said, well, meditation is not the worst word for jhana, which is true because also the Tibetan word for jhana, which is samten, does imply this stabilizing the mind. But when we understand the sense of meditation as just familiarizing ourselves with this condition of just being aware, with just being present, then we could say meditation is just that familiarization with that, what Rinpoche was saying, to just sustain 10 seconds of not being caught up. That's very, very helpful. See, sometimes with the problem with meditation is that we're led to believe that it refers to something very mystical and deep. And that's, of course, where meditation can be misleading in the sense of sort of going into deep pondering or into some deep state. What we would like to do with the practice of meditation is free the mind. And the mind tends to be caught up in thoughts about what's coming next, you know? Let's say I say we're finishing a bit earlier today. Okay, what's going to come after that? And so on. And what happened before? Our mind tends to get caught up in so many different things where actually the Tibetan word for what we do with our mind is we conceptualize, or the Tibetan word is namto, which means actually conception of individual objects. We're on a theme. Like when we ruminate, that means we sort of regurgitate particular mental images over and over again. And this actually provides a sense of reality. We have these perceptions that initially are just perceptions, but then we begin to solidify them in particular ways. So it's just like if we have a movie and we begin to believe that the movie is true. And this is where the breaking of that, switching off the projector, allowing ourselves to just settle in being present. At that time, we're not keeping one particular thing in mind. And meditation is not necessarily keeping one particular thing in mind. Now, what we tend to do is we tend to continually be caught up in what happens in the mind. And to know and recognize that is quite helpful. To merely know that we are held again and again by our own thoughts is already, being aware of the addiction that we have. That's sort of step one, that we begin to know that we're doing this to ourselves. And that's where also when we're studying the Abhidharma, we begin to understand that our impulses are driven by us just fixating, keeping our mind entangled in these processes of just sticking with one idea. And so if we begin to know that's what's happening, we're already less held by it. We're more informed. So meditation is a way in which we could sustain this freedom from being entangled. Now, it does not mean that we won't have thoughts, but it means that we're less likely to gullibly tag along with the thoughts. And so meditation is really the place where we begin to connect with reality without this sort of overlay of projections. It's where we switch off the projector and we actually just begin to experience being present. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to be by some lake in Alberta. It doesn't mean that we have to have particular circumstances. It can actually, and Rinpoche was also alluding to this in his teaching, we could actually be in the middle of some busy situation. We could be having a conversation. Right now, as you're listening to me, you could be having this just sustained awareness just of being present. There's a place where you could be reacting, you could be daydreaming, you could be not present, you could be basically distracted in one way or another, but there's also a place where you could just be present. That you can have even when somebody is talking. You can sustain that. It can be there when it's quiet. And it can also continue when there's talking going on. So this is a challenge, that we could actually remain present. And the method for deepening this experience in the Buddhist tradition, which, because that is really where we begin to connect with reality, we begin to break out of our self-imposed little dormant situation. And that's where awakening comes on the basis of then opening up to a wider vision, which is this notion of vipassana. And that's also, like Rinpoche was, he appreciated that, of course, Vipassana can be understood in terms of technique and so forth, but it really is, what we mean with Vipassana is this Lakton means, Vipassana means to actually see more, that we're able to actually have a wider perspective. So that's what we wish to achieve, and that's what we would do the moment that we're not entangled in our thinking. So despite what meditation looks like, people going in and going deep and all of that, it's really just about us beginning to take off the blinders. And to do that effectively helps. It helps. We're not saying that you can only do it when you're sitting, but it does help to be at a place where we can sustain this quality of not being distracted. And that's where, for 2,500 years, there has been this practice of sitting on a cushion, and this enables a wider perspective. It's not that we're addicted to the cushion, it's not that the cushion is the only way. And of course, what we're trying to essentially establish is this wider perspective where we, like we talked about before, where we begin to cultivate prajna. We begin to be less entangled, and we begin to see the nature of phenomena. And that's where then prajna begins to see reality. So that wisdom, that wider perspective, this is what we facilitate, this is what we cultivate, this is what we effectively manifest through the practice of sitting. And we do this on the basis of not being entangled in our ordinary concepts, our distracted condition. And this is where, when we're touching on the application of this in a Buddhist context, we very often see this done in conjunction with invoking a greater perspective, either through reading the scriptures, and particularly then in Tibetan Buddhism and in Vajrayana Buddhism, in terms of invoking something greater. Just remember the memory of the Buddha, Buddha Anusmriti. Thinking of the Buddha, like Tsongtse Rinpoche also recently has been teaching this, remembering the Buddha and his gesture of touching the earth and highlighting the beauty and the brilliance of the Buddha just sitting there. And how does he manifest enlightenment? simply that's just touching the earth. How elegant and beautiful and understated is that? And so the practice of meditation is not about anything other than just beginning to connect with reality. And so we through invoking the image of the Buddha, we are inspired with the Buddha's example. And that's where the image of the Buddha is not something conceptual. It's just thinking of the Buddha, but through that, there's a quality of an atmosphere that's generated. We might recite the Heart Sutra, or we might invoke the Buddha's image, like we do here with Jamgon Mipa images, beautiful liturgy, treasure, blessing. And through doing that, there's a place where we're touching on something that's not conceptual. And that's where then this vipassana is imbued with the dimension of blessing, this dimension of something luminous that is very alive and very aligned with not just, you could say, a dimension of the mind, but also on a physical level. The moment that we see the Buddha, we actually also begin to sit like the Buddha. The moment that we chant the mantra, it's doing something to our speech. So in this way, the practice that we are engaging with regards to this awake or luminous quality that's innate to us, that we can refer to as Buddha nature, is in fact a practice of yoga, that we're beginning to align ourselves, align our mind, align our speech, align our body, our whole dimension of being. We're aligning this with this awake quality. And that's where you could say it's not really that you, as you're sitting, that you're just sort of going into a particular posture, but you're actually expressing enlightenment. Actually, Suzuki Roshi in Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind talks about this, about just by sitting itself, you're being the Buddha. You're imitating the Buddha, but you're more than that. You're expressing it. So that's where the posture is not just a means, but it's also an expression of the result. So similarly, also the various Vajrayana practices that are all about expressing the awake condition really is something that comes from this vipassana that recognizes this luminous quality that's innate to our entire being, body, speech, and mind. But we begin with this place of cutting through the ordinary concepts. And that's where us just for 10 seconds, we should try this when we're having when we're having a moment of anger, or a moment of really being fixated on something, or just a moment of feeling sad or feeling carried away and agitated in one way or another. Just say, okay, this is happening right now, and just being aware without necessarily following any particular narrative or storyline. All this is really all that Rinpoche is talking about, and all that we're doing on the practice in the path of meditation is really just discovering a place of freedom of mind. We don't necessarily have to go into some particular state. This is, of course, where there's sort of different traditions. There are those who would very much encourage going into particular states. But actually, we don't need to go into any state. We already have it. Going into a particular state and sustaining a state comes a little bit from a poverty-stricken place of having to fabricate something, that we need to add something or going into a special state. This also goes for drugs, ladies and gentlemen. Don't do drugs, because as much as you might have insights, they're just that you're conditioned by some particular chemistry that's taking place. The proposition here of the Buddha is definitely that we go beyond the ordinary projections of the mind, for sure, but we don't need to impose anything. We don't need to fabricate. It really just comes from us discontinuing delusion. And so the ordinary mind that always wants and grasps operates from a very poverty-stricken place. And so us actually pulling out the plug is stating our own independence, stating our own dignity. And that's where you could say Buddhist meditation by definition should be boredom. because we're not feeding the ordinary childish, immature craving. You know, it's like sugar. You might think anything, you know, anything that's delicious has to taste like sugar. But, you know, it's not good for you. Sugar is not good for you. But the Chinese call it the white poison, right? And so we know that sugar is not good for us, but we might just be addicted to sugar and so forth. So we might have our whole happiness defined in terms of getting what we want. But that's a very poverty-stricken place, really, that just comes from this lack of settling into this bliss of our own autonomy and our own independence in terms of just sustaining our own freedom of mind. If we're continually feeding this monkey that wants more and more and more, we're never going to, it's like drinking salt water. So this practice of settling the mind is really becoming autonomous. It's really becoming free. It is what enables us to begin to relate to the world, relate to our reality, relate to who we are. We have two ways of approaching this. Shamatha, which is the practice of, you could say, creating the framework, the structure in which peace can happen. And without that, we actually are surprisingly dull and unaware of the undertow, the undercurrent of all these thoughts and impulses that continually drive us. So without shamatha, vipassana just remains theory. So for us to really apply the theory, we need to, like the Kagyu masters would say, bone needs to meet rock. We actually need to sit, and that's where we begin to have some actual experience of where it is we're continually gullibly tagging along with the thoughts. And once we have that, yes, then we should apply that under all circumstances. So we should never think meditation is just sitting on a cushion, but it does begin on the cushion. Unless we're particularly gifted, which of course, you know, people might be, and they might be very sensitive and so on. But in general, since the time of the Buddha, meditators have recommended sitting a lot. And so there is really there's a lot of success with regards to sitting. Of course, you might be new to this and sitting might not appeal. And in that case, yes, then check out all the different options there are in terms of just sustaining moments of non-distraction and checking out the Buddhist teaching. But to actually begin to deepen this, there has to be some practice of sitting. And so that's where then there's some real experience that begins to take place. So that practice of really just creating a framework in which we can be not carried away and deceived by the undertow of thoughts is what we call shamatha. And it's then from there that we begin to have this more open relationship to our reality. We could have studied the teaching and we could have seen on the basis of logic and our own assessment and so forth, we can see the truth of no self. And that's where vipassana can be approached through analysis. But then again, also it needs to be applied through application and settling. And that's where we then talk about the settling meditation. And that's particularly within what we emphasize when we're practicing meditation, and we just settle. We settle the mind, we maybe just focus on the breath, or just settling the mind and not being distracted. This is then the dimension of settling meditation in the conjunction with vipassana. Somebody has a question. So what we're going to be doing here, as usual, is we'll chant a few minutes. We'll go through the treasure of blessings, invoking the image of the Buddha. Like Tongsa Khyentse Rinpoche repeatedly has said, you know, this is such a beautiful gesture of the Buddha just touching the earth. And this practice, of course, is very much phrased in a very devotional language of bhakti, which is very much, you could say, coming from the heart. So some of us in the modern skeptical tradition, we might not be at ease with these kind of expressions of devotion. A bit like, you know, pre-teenagers, they might sort of feel slightly disgusted when they come across the language of love and the sort of the whole poetry around love. You know, if you haven't felt it, you might think this is completely ridiculous. So that's where modern people sometimes they're a bit alienated to the language. But I think everybody appreciates really the image of the Buddha, and also the I think the liturgy. I think everybody will get it, and this then paves the way really for setting an atmosphere of just settling the mind. So this is what we'll be doing. Meanwhile, I'll just, if there's any questions, I'll take a few. What did Rinpoche mean when he states that you cannot avoid or step out of habits? Well, just to say that habits are going to be there. So we're going to sit down and meditate, and there's going to be urges to get up and not meditate. You know, even old Buddhists have this. You know, so often when I'm doing these sessions, and you know, as soon as it's times to meditate, then you know, then oh, I have to go home and do this, or I have an appointment. I'm very busy. And etc., etc. And of course, it might be valid, so I shan't doubt anybody. But it is interesting that there is a little bit of a habit of not wanting to just stay present. So this is what we call the vasanas, the imprints that lie on our ground consciousness, that essentially are, and that is the nature of ego. It actually wants to perpetuate itself, and it doesn't want it doesn't want us to switch on the light. It wants to sort of fester in the dark. So that's where we can't avoid this sort of habituation. It's there, just like any addiction. So we can't avoid that, but we can do something about it, and meditation is very helpful in that regard. That is what we're doing. So I don't think he said that we can't step out of our habits. Yeah, that's very much what we are doing with the Dharma. But we definitely will continually be confronted with our habitual patterns. Okay, somebody is being very generous in their appreciation here. Thank you. So, okay. Okay, well, look, we'll just take a couple of minutes break, and then we'll do the treasure blessing, and then we'll, I think, just today sit very briefly, and then we'll conclude. Okay, that's the plan. Okay, I'm gonna just take a 2-minute break, and then we'll begin. Thank you. Okay, so we'll begin. I keep thinking it's called the Treasury of Blessings. Chinlap Tenzer. So yeah, the Treasury of Blessings. Don't know why I thought it was Treasure of Blessings. Anyway, Treasury of Blessings. There you go. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until I attain enlightenment. Through the merit of practicing generosity and so on, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until I attain enlightenment. Through the merit of practicing generosity and so on, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until I attain enlightenment. Through the merit of practicing generosity and so on, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. May all sentient beings enjoy happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the sacred happiness devoid of suffering. And may they dwell in boundless equanimity that is free from attachment and aversion. As the union of unborn emptiness and the ceaseless appearances of interdependence, magically there appears before me in the sky, amidst vast clouds of offerings, on a jewel lion throne and lotus sun and moon disk seats, the incomparable teacher, lion of the Shakyas. His body, the color of gold, adorned with major and minor marks, clad in the 3 Dharma robes, he sits in Vajra posture. His right hand gracefully poised in the earth-touching mudra, and his left hand in the gesture of meditation, holding an alms bowl full of nectar. Like a mountain of gold, magnificent he shines in splendor, spreading beams of wisdom light across the whole expanse of space. The 8 close suns, 16 elders, and the like, a vast ocean-like retinue of noble beings encircles him all around. Simply think of him and he grants the glory as the highest bliss, liberation from samsara and nirvana, the 2 extremes. He is the great being, perfect embodiment of every source of refuge. With your great compassion, you embrace this turbulent and degenerate world and made 500 mighty aspirations. You are as exalted as the white lotus. Whoever hears your name shall never return to samsara. Most compassionate teacher, to you I pay homage. All my own and others' virtues of body, speech, and mind, together with all our possessions, visualized like Samantabhadra's offering clouds, I offer to you. All the harmful actions and transgressions I have committed through beginningless time, each and every one, I now confess with intense and heartfelt regret. In all virtuous actions of the noble ones and ordinary beings, accumulated throughout the past, present, and future, I rejoice. Turn the wheel of the profound and vast Dharma teaching ceaselessly and in every direction, I pray. Your wisdom body is like space and remains changeless throughout past, present, and future. Yet in the perception of those to be guided, you go through the display of birth and death. Even so, let your form body continue always to appear. Through all the virtues I have accumulated in the past, am accumulating now, and will accumulate in the future, for the sake of benefiting all beings who are as infinite as space, may you, the sovereign of Dharma, be forever pleased, and may all attain the state of the victorious one, the Lord of Dharma. Living beings like us, adrift in this degenerate age, have no guidance nor protection. Because of your kindness, caring for us with surpassing compassion, every manifestation in this world now of the 3 jewels is your enlightened activity. You are then our only refuge, incomparable, supreme. So from our hearts we pray with total confidence and faith. Do not neglect the great promises you made in times gone by, but hold us until we attain enlightenment with your compassion. Supreme Teacher, Bhagavan Tathagata Arhat, complete and perfect Buddha, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni Buddha, to you I pay homage, to you I make offerings, in you I take refuge. Supreme Teacher, Bhagavan Tathagata Arhat, complete and perfect Buddha, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni Buddha, to you I pay homage, to you I make offerings, in you I take refuge. Supreme Teacher, Bhagavan Tathagata Arhat, complete and perfect Buddha, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni Buddha, to you I pay homage, to you I make offerings, in you I take refuge. Te yatao muni muni mahamunaya soha. Te yatao muni muni mahamunaya soha. Te yatao muni muni mahamunaya soha. Deyatao 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 Muni Muni Mahamunaya Soha. Om 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 Mani Mani Mahamunaya Soha. From the Buddha's body there emanates a great radiance, a multicolored rays of wisdom light, dispelling all our own and others' obscurations, and causing all the genuine qualities of the Mahayana path to arise within us, so that we attain the level of perfection from which we will never return again to samsara. By this merit, may all attain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may all beings be freed. May bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it has not yet come to be, and where it has arisen, may it never fail, but grow and flourish ever more and more. May the Buddha appear in this world, may the light of the teaching shine like the sun. May the holders of the teachings live in harmony, and thus may all be auspicious for the teaching to endure. We pray for the good health of the teachers. We pray for their precious lives to be long. We pray for their activities to spread and increase. May we be blessed never to part from the teachers. Akashasya stiti yavatcha jagataha stiti tavan mama stiti bhuyahat jagadukani nignata. Akashasya stiti yavatcha jagataha stiti tavan mama stiti bhuyahat jagadukani nignata. Tavan mama stiti bhuyahat jagadukani nignata. Tavan mama stiti bhuyahat jagadukani nignata. As long as space remains, as long as the world remains, may I too remain to alleviate the sufferings of the world. Thank you very much for being here, and shall see you again, I hope. Okay.